It's good to be here with all of you and pleased to be in a room of people who are committed to ensuring that we as a country live up to our commitment to being a nation of second chances. I want to thank the Vera Institute for Justice and the Ford Foundation for helping to bring us together. I want to, of course, thank our colleagues at the Department of Justice who have been such wonderful partners in this work on Second Chance Pell. I can recall last summer joining my predecessor, Secretary Duncan, and Attorney General Lynch and Broderick Johnson, who chairs the President's My Brother's Keeper task force at Jessup Prison, where we visited with the Goucher education program and announced the launch of Second Chance Pell. And less than a year later, here we are with 69 Second Chance Pell sites committing to serve 12,000 students across 28 states. We will invest $30 million in Pell Grants in these programs, and we will make a tremendous difference not only in the lives of those 12,000 students, but we have the opportunity together to demonstrate the value of this investment of Pell Grants in creating second chances for folks who are incarcerated. As I think about the importance of this work, I think about our colleague Darrell Atkinson, who many of you know. He's the Second Chance Fellow at the Department of Justice, and his life story in many ways exemplifies why this work is so important. Darrell, in 1996, pled guilty to a first-time nonviolent drug crime and spent 40 months in prison. And Darrell will tell you that in prison, he didn't have the opportunity to continue his education. That was, in a sense, lost time for him. But through the support of family, when he left prison, he was able to go to junior college, got a 4.0 at junior college, then went on to a 4-year degree program and law school with challenge because those institutions, some of the institutions were hesitant to admit a student with a criminal record. And yet, Darrell pursued his dream with the support of his family. Went on to practice law successfully and now serves at the Justice Department and is helping lead a movement to strengthen our country. Darrell's example points to why this work is so important, the difference that we can make together by creating educational opportunities for folks who are incarcerated. We have the opportunity to help people while they're paying their debt to society also acquire the kinds of skills and education and job training that will allow them to return successfully to the community. It is better for them. It is better for our communities. It will produce safer communities. It is cost effective. And maybe one of the things that came through most powerfully to me when we were at Goucher was the difference it makes for families and children. And when we sat with the folks at the Goucher program at Jessup Prison, almost every single participant talked about the impact their pursuing their education was having on their children. They talked about telling their children about their studies. They talked about kids saying, I want to go to college just like you, because they were inspired by their father's example. We have a huge challenge as a country. We incarcerate more people than any other developed nation. We made a series of poor public policy decisions that resulted in systemic mass incarceration. And the consequences of that for children are dire. We know that children of folks who are incarcerated are more likely to struggle in school, more likely to get in trouble themselves. We can change that. We can break that pattern. We can break that cycle with the work that we are doing here today. We have the opportunity to test out a variety of educational strategies. In the room, we have folks who will take an in-person approach, folks who will take an online approach, folks who will take a blended approach. We will learn from the varied academic approaches that are taken by the institutions here. We will learn from the diversity of the programs. We have programs that will lead students to an associate's degree, programs that will lead students to a bachelor's degree, technical certificates in welding and carpentry and electrical work, non-technical certificates in areas like business administration and marketing. What we know is that the evidence supports this work. We know that the RAND study showed a 43% reduction in recidivism for participation in high-quality correctional education programs. We know there are programs in this room who have run long-standing philanthropically supported education in prison programs that have incredibly low recidivism rates because folks empowered with education and training are able to make a go of it when they return to the community, and that is how we ensure that they don't end up back in prison. The evidence that you will build, I hope, will help support a case for undoing the mistake that was made in the mid-90s to take away Pell access for folks who are incarcerated. The president proposed in his 2017 budget restoring Pell access for those who are incarcerated, and I hope the evidence that you will produce and your loud voices will help us to move that agenda forward. But we have work to do beyond just the Second Chance Pell Initiative. I want to take a moment to describe some of those efforts. We have work to do across agencies to ensure that reentry is an opportunity for success for folks. I'm pleased to be a part of a multi-agency effort. We're pleased as a department to be a part of that multi-agency effort that brings in our colleagues at Justice, at Labor, at Housing, at Agriculture, a cross-agency effort that is designed to say that when folks have paid their debt to society and are returning to the community, we should make sure that we don't put new obstacles in their way. We have to make it possible for folks to get quality housing. We've got to make it possible for folks to get access to health care. We've got to worry about issues of food insecurity for folks who are returning while they transition back. We've got to make sure that we have the sort of mental health supports and family counseling in place that will help folks make a smooth transition back. And we've got to make sure there aren't obstacles to employment. And we are working in a cross-agency way to try and change the current circumstance where too many folks who are returning find that there are so many obstacles to their successful return that they end up quickly back in prison. We also are doing work to change the reality for our young people who are in juvenile justice facilities. We worry that in too many places, juvenile justice doesn't ensure that students have access to quality educational opportunities. Together with the Department of Justice, we issued guidance more than a year ago that directed states to ensure that folks who are in juvenile justice facilities get access to quality educational programs, and particularly that students with disabilities who are overrepresented in juvenile justice facilities get access to the special education services to which they are entitled. We also pointed out that those who are in juvenile justice facilities who are ready to do college-level work can access Pell Grants to support that work. Together with the Department of Justice, we're investing $5.7 million in career tech ed focused juvenile justice transition programs that support students while they are still in the juvenile justice facility and then as they transition back to the community. We are also taking on the school to prison pipeline. Our recent civil rights data collection survey data showed that African American students in pre-K are more than 3 times as likely to be suspended as white students. Think about that, 3- and 4-year-olds suspended from pre-K already being placed on the school to prison pipeline at 3 and 4 years old. In our K-12 system, African American students are nearly 4 times as likely to be suspended from school as white students. We have nearly 3 million kids each year who are suspended from school. We are working with school systems all across the country to rethink discipline, to replace exclusionary discipline practices with restorative justice, with the kinds of mental health supports that are necessary for students who are struggling with crises outside of school. We also are working with higher ed institutions, some in this room, on our Fair Chance Higher Education Pledge. We have over 70 million Americans who have a criminal record, and yet many of our higher ed institutions create a barrier to entry right at the outset because of questions in the application that discourage folks even from applying to higher education, the kinds of obstacles that got in Daryl's way when he was pursuing his education. And so we are working with institutions that have committed to this Fair Chance Higher Education Pledge to rethink their application process, to move beyond the box, and also to rethink the kinds of services and supports they put in place for folks who've been incarcerated who are coming to their campuses. We've got to make sure at every campus that we are maximizing opportunity. Higher education has a moral mission to try to expand opportunity in this country, and we're pleased that we have 25 institutions that committed to the launch of the Fair Chance Higher Education Pledge, and I hope folks in the room will help us to expand that community. I'll end with this before turning it over to Sally. Second chances are deeply important. You were kind enough to talk about my academic record, but that almost didn't happen. I was perhaps the first Secretary of Education to be kicked out of high school. I hope I will not be the last. My mom passed away when I was 8, my dad when I was 12. I lived with my dad after my mom passed away. He was quite sick with undiagnosed Alzheimer's, and home was this very unstable, unsafe place. And after my dad passed, I moved around between schools and family members, and through all of that period, school took on this hugely important place in my life. School was the place that was consistent and where I could be a kid and where I felt nurtured and supported. But when I was a teenager, I was angry about lots of experiences that I'd had as a kid, angry about the fact that I'd been more or less on my own since I was 8. And I got kicked out of high school because I was angry at adults and angry with authority and just plain ignored the rules. And folks could have given up on me. It would have been very easy for them to say, here's an African-American, Latino male, went to New York City public schools, family in crisis. What chance does he have? But because they didn't give up on me, I'm standing here today. And like many of the students we worry most about, I am only able to be here because people gave me a meaningful second chance, because they invested in me. And so one of the reasons I'm so proud to be in this room with all of you is because when you look at our students that we work with, you see not the obstacles, but the opportunity, not the mistakes, but the possibility. You see the kind of hope that we need so desperately as a country. And if the last few weeks in this country haven't reminded us enough, we desperately need hope and commitment to possibility in our lives, to seeing what is possible in others, to seeing the best in others, and trying to create a society that is more just. And so thank you for being our fellow travelers in this work to build a more just society. Please be loud evangelists for this work. We've got to tell this story because it's a story about who we are as a country of second chances. Thanks so much.